Hello, and welcome to Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. It's cult day here on Dark Hearts, and as usual, I've got a crazy story for you, one that I can pretty much guarantee you haven't heard. Sadly, this one is not just crazy, it's very disturbing and dark. What happens when you take some wacky Mormon fundamentalists, total isolation from everything, including reality, and mix it with apocalyptic fetishes? You get a bunch of kooks living in an echo chamber. What happens when you add unimaginable child abuse to that equation? You get a bunch of kooks living in an echo chamber who need to be fed to the sharks, alive. This tale is going to have you wishing for the apocalypse these idiots were preparing for. And when you hear at the end of the episode what comes out later on in the story, it's going to make your blood boil. Today we are talking about a cult of religious nutjobs that called themselves Knights of the Crystal Blade. I'm your host, Stacy Lee. Let's get into it. Our story begins in 2015, just west of my hometown, Cedar City, Utah. I've taken you to Cedar City before. We went there on the episode entitled The Dog Valley Murder, which is still one of the saddest stories I've ever covered. This is the thumbnail if you would like to watch that episode. It's here on this channel under the playlist Dining with Death. Cedar City, Utah is a beautiful little town that now has about 38,000 people living there. When I grew up there, the population was like 8 to 10,000. It was very small. The town is kind of split into a couple of groups. You've got the academics who live there because of Southern Utah University, a very well-respected small college that also has a Tony Award-winning Shakespearean festival. And then you've got the good old boys. And by good old boys, I mean women too. These are people who would pull over and help you on the side of the road if you're stranded. They're people that would help an old lady to her car. But they're also people who might tell you to pull yourself up by your bootstraps if you're having a hard time. And some of them have some pretty backwards ideas about a few things. But I love my hometown, and I'm proud to say I'm from Cedar City, Utah. Now, if you've been with me for any amount of time, you know, Utah does tend to draw some kooky people to it. And I don't mean cute, kooky, independent, lovable weirdos like the ones in Austin and Portland. I mean like dangerous, off-the-rails, culty, apocalyptic prepper kooks that come here because they know there's a lot of wide open space where they can hide out in the boonies and no one will know they're there. We've talked about the town of Burrell before, where two men actually drilled a hole in a woman's head to open her third eye. If you would like to watch that episode, this is the thumbnail for that one. We've talked about Duchesne here in Utah, where a meth-cooking hillbilly who owned a full-grown African lion as a house pet murdered and then blew up two people with dynamite. Here's the thumbnail for that episode. And of course, we've talked about two of the most evil women to ever exist on earth, Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrandt, who had kids tied up in Jody's basement a few miles from where I'm sitting right now, while they sat on the internet giving mommy advice. You want to know how petty I am? Every time I sit and have a pedicure or I eat a really delicious meal, I think about all the people that I hate who are in jail. And don't get to have any of those small things in life, those pleasures in life. And I know they're missing them. I'm petty Betty. I think about the horrible things these people have done. And I sit back in my massage chair during my pedicure, my little $50 pedicure. And I think these assholes don't get to have any of these little pleasures. And it just brings a smile to my face because I am petty like that. You do shitty things, enjoy prison. You hurt kids, I actually take joy in your misery. That's who I am as a person, and I love that for me. But yes, we have more than our fair share of dangerous weirdos here in Utah because of our unusual history and because of the ruggedness of the country and the Wild West nature of the attitude here. The area that we're talking about today, west of Cedar City, is very isolated. It is nothing more than sand and sagebrush that sits on some vistas that create really quite a nice view of the valley. It's all surrounded by the Wawa Mountains. This is a gorgeous area in Utah. If you were to film a nature documentary or also a horror movie about people whose car breaks down in the middle of nowhere, you could do both near the Wawa Mountains. The area is dotted with old mines, so you do have to be somewhat careful. But when you're in this area, you feel like you have stepped back in time. You feel like you are the only person on earth until someone else comes along, because the area is so large. It's in such a large valley that if there is any kind of movement at all, especially from a vehicle, you can see whatever that is for miles and miles away. Any movement in that area stirs up the dust. And because the wash underneath the mountains is so long and open, there's no sneaking up on you when you're there. And that quality makes the area appealing to people who are doing things that they shouldn't be doing and don't want to be snuck up on. All there is dust on the flat land and rabbit brush and wide open sky surrounded by those beautiful mountains. Out living on 80 acres of dusty, windblown, high desert Utah soil is a Mormon fundamentalist named Eugene Richardson. What is a Mormon fundamentalist? We discuss that a lot here on this channel. We just call them pligs around here. Mormon fundamentalism is a cult, and it's a very dark and evil one at that. The people practice the original version of Mormonism, an even darker version of the original version. They practice the church the way it existed a few years after Joseph Smith founded it, and then Brigham Young took over it. After Brigham Young died, it was John Taylor, and then Wilford Woodruff, who was the president of the church when the church abolished polygamy in order to get statehood in the Union. The federal government told the Mormons in Utah they would never get statehood if they didn't do away with polygamy because it is immoral, and that's the only reason that the Mormons stopped practicing this way of life. When that happened, there were some early Mormons that thought the church was making a mistake and should stay the way it was founded. So they splintered off and became known as the Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints, the FLDS. These are the people who dress like it's the 1800s, even though they drive $80,000 pickup trucks and have cell phones. Don't get me started. The FLDS do use the Book of Mormon, and they believe everything the mainstream Mormons believe, with the exception of the teaching of polygamy. But when you're a child rapist in mainstream Mormonism, you go to jail. Well, most of the time. When you're a child rapist in the FLDS, you're just one of the crew. Their practice of marrying little girls off to old men is vile and disgusting and illegal. And when I think about how long it took to get the state of Utah to imprison Warren Jeffs, I'm working on an episode about him, it makes me really angry. What the FLDS does is wrong. Period. There is kind of a movement down here right now in southern Utah to make the polygamists more accepted. You know, it's not their fault type of a vibe. They're in a cult. I am not part of that movement and never will be part of any sympathetic movement towards any group that rapes children, mainly girls, or steals freedom and education from children and women while putting them to work basically as slaves. Now, I obviously have a lot of opinions on this, and there are reasons for that, believe me. But that's what a Mormon fundamentalist is. So Eugene Richardson is living out in this valley in a little trailer. He's kind of exiled himself to the middle of nowhere because that's how he likes it. But Eugene isn't alone because he's got the internet, and he uses the internet to stay in touch with like-minded people. What are the common threads between Eugene and the people he connects with online? Scriptures, Revelations these men claim to have, visions of the future and the coming apocalypse. Now, we have covered many apocalyptic Mormon kooks on this channel. We've got Spring Thibodeau, who kidnapped her own son, Blaze, to take him to Alaska to wait out the end of times because Spring was convinced that her son Blaze was some sort of warrior king that would help usher in the second coming of Jesus after the apocalypse. I mean, you want to talk about crazy boy moms. There's this weird, uncomfortable talk on TikTok about how some boy moms, mothers of boys, are like weirdly obsessed with their sons and kind of too close with their sons. Well, these mothers ain't got nothing on Spring Thibodeau and her weird ass. She is the ultimate gross boy mom. We've got the king and queen of Mormon kooks, murdering piece of shit lunatics Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell. But for every one of these people that you hear about in the news, there are 100 that you don't. They're out there, just like Eugene Richardson is. And it really gives me the creeps to think about these people out sitting in the middle somewhere in the desert in a nasty trailer, rundown trailer, day after day, online talking about the apocalypse and their visions and, you know, what they're going to do if the government doesn't do exactly what they want them to do. It's disturbing to think about just how many of these people there really are. Two of the men that Eugene really starts to connect with online are Samuel Schaeffer and John Alvin Culltharp. They connected using a Facebook group page that focused on the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints doctrinal change, the change that took place in 1890, banning polygamy for the singular purpose of getting statehood in Utah. On this Facebook page, the name of which is never divulged, the men are discussing the fact that they believe the Mormons were wrong to ban polygamy, that the founder of the church, Joseph Smith, had a revelation from God telling him to marry children and other men's wives. You know, these guys always have a revelation from God telling them to have all the sex with all the young girls. Sometimes I just get so tired. It's Cult 101, and to think of these men sitting online trying to justify the fact that they too want to have sex with children using the cloak of religion to say it's okay, it just gets my blood boiling. You weirdo pedos. I cannot stand these people. Samuel Schaeffer and John Alvin Coltharp are pedophiles. Plain and simple. They're also one slice short of a ham sandwich. Samuel Schaeffer looks like he's auditioning for Nicolas Cage's part in Longlegs. I mean, look at this guy. And by the way, if you haven't seen that film, oh my gosh, it's so good. But look at this douchebag with these black socks and Tevas. And then there's John Alvin Coltharp. He looks like he's just about to climb the clock tower and start shooting. I mean, you couldn't find two creepier looking weirdos if you tried. Samuel and John are partners in crime. Yes, they are talking to Eugene Richardson online, but the two of them have already formed their own cult. And yes, you guessed it. They call their little cult Knights of the Crystal Plane. Because of course they do. I honestly do not think you could come up with anything dorkier. It is so fitting for these two pine cones. I read some of Samuel Schaeffer's writings. You guys. He writes about how when he was a teenager, these guys are only in their 30s now. They're pretty young guys. And he played Dungeons and Dragons, that he had the supernatural ability to roll only sixes with the dice. And he talks about how his friends were always mesmerized by his ability to only roll sixes. Then Samuel talks about you're going to think I'm making this up. He talks about he and his fellow D&D players cast a spell once over the city of Provo, and a mist fell down over the town and turned all of the people into kind of like these zombie creatures for a while. But then when everything went back to normal and the mist dissipated, none of the citizens of Provo remember being in that zombie-like state. Why do we have to live with these people? Why can't we just ship them all off to an island and let them do whatever they want? You know, stupid people don't know they're stupid. They only hurt us, the people that they have to live around. And I'm no rocket scientist. Samuel talks about this vision he had where he meets a goat goat-headed hermaphrodite. That is the word he uses. The preferred word now is intersex, and that is a real thing. And this goat-headed beast throws a bag over his head and then throws him into the back of a van. Samuel is able to speak some ancient Hindu words to this goat thing, and so it lets him go. I need a break. I need a break already. Despite all of this, Samuel is cleared by the LDS church and he goes on a mission for that church. This is not that long ago. The Knights of the Crystal Blade followers, all two of them, believe that it is time to leave society, to exile themselves, much in the way Eugene Richardson has done, to an isolated area. Because you see, the apocalypse is coming, and they must wait out the apocalypse in isolation in order to survive it. These people just don't understand how radiation works, do they? I mean, they really, really don't understand how radiation works. They think they can just go over there and watch the mushroom clouds from over there. And then when everyone else is dead, they'll just pick up where they left off. Their lives will be just, normal again. I've said this quote before. I can't remember exactly who said it, but it says, I do not know with what weapons World War III will be fought with, but we know that World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones, because World War III is going to blast us back to the Dark Ages, and I want no part of it. But what is not laughable are these sick pedophiles' other beliefs. Samuel Schaeffer and John Coltharp have children, unfortunately, for those children who have to say these are their fathers, and both of them have daughters. The men plan, this is just so sickening, you're going to get these two disgusting creeps plan to take their own daughters into the desert with them. These girls are 7, 8, and 2 4-year-olds. So they each have like a 7 and an 8-year-old, and then they each have a 4-year-old. And they are going to marry them off to each other. I can already feel my blood pressure rising. Samuel's daughter marries John, and John's daughter marries Samuel. And their plan is when the girls become fertile, when they're like 11 or 12, they're going to get them pregnant and start repopulating after the apocalypse. I mean, you talk about men that do not have the right to breathe the same air as any of the rest of us. I'm going to take a deep breath is what I'm going to do. Samuel and John start telling Eugene Richardson about their plans. They're talking online in these chat rooms for freaks. And they're trying to convince Eugene to join them, but Eugene kind of laughs at these two because they're pedophile psychopaths who want to marry children, right? Oh, no, Eugene doesn't have a problem with that. He just doesn't believe that Samuel and John's prophecies, that their visions are correct because they don't match up with the visions that he has had. And Eugene believes that his visions are correct because they line up with the scriptures in his mind, and Samuel and John's do not. We all know how some religious people love to cherry pick scriptures and apply them however they want. My favorite thing is when a religious person screams at me, well, the Bible says. Honey, I don't give a rat's ass what the Bible says any more than I care what Lord of the Rings says. I am an agnostic person. I do not believe that the Bible is divine. I believe it is a book of writings by ancient men who believed that, thunder was God being angry and that donkeys could talk and that a man could get swallowed up by a giant fish and live in its tummy. And while I believe there are some good morals in some of the stories in the Bible, I do not in any way believe the Bible is divine in nature, divinely inspired, divinely written, or holy in any way, shape, or form. So when Bible thumpers scream, well, the Bible says, at people like me, that means nothing to us. If you want to believe in the Bible, that is your right. And I will always support your right to believe whatever you want, so long as your belief system does not hurt another human being. We cannot say that for the Bible because the Bible has caused more harm and more war and more death and suffering than any book on earth. Still, I support your right to believe in it until your beliefs bump into my beliefs or lack thereof, and then we have a problem. But I bring up the Bible because we need to talk about the book of Revelations. The book of Revelations has caused so much strife between and among human beings. And the book of Revelations is not in any way, shape, or form a prophecy about today. Bible scholars, people that know much more than I do, agree on that. The book of Revelations was written centuries ago to bring peace and comfort to first century people who believed in Jesus. The book of Revelations has nothing to do with the modern world we live in, and the authors never intended it to be so. It was written to tell people at the time that if they do A, B, and C, they will be spared when the end comes. And then the authors went on to make the end out to be some horrific event, from which they could be spared. You can't have good if you don't have evil. So in order to have goodness and religiosity and spiritual superiority, you've got to have some sort of evil to fight. There is no good if there isn't evil. But the book of Revelations is not a prophecy for modern times. And anyone who believes that, you need to look into the history of the authors and the book a bit better, because it is time we stop tolerating people like Samuel and John who insist on being completely uneducated and continually trying to use this book as some sort of excuse for the terrible things they do. I am sick of it, and I know many of you are as well. If you want to believe in the Bible, that is great, and I hope it brings you peace. But we need to agree it causes a lot of fanaticism and problems. Although Samuel and John are unsuccessful in getting Eugene to join them, the three of them continue to talk. Samuel and John are able to get a few other followers. There's like maybe 5 or 6 of them who have officially joined the Knights of the Crystal Blade and were baptized into this cult. One man is a man from Idaho who had a little money. This man ended up purchasing land near Eugene Richardson in the same valley so that Samuel and John could set up their little camp. Ugh. Another member of Knights of the Crystal Blade is a man named Robert Rowe, who left California and came to Utah. Why? Because he was promised a child bride, a 5-year-old. This pedophile wanted to join the cult so he could have sex with a little girl. We're gonna say it like it is. We don't say underage girls. We don't say minors. We don't say young ladies. We say children, because that's what they are. Children. Innocent children. Now, this Facebook page that, like I said, has never been named, has been taken down. It doesn't exist anymore because, hello, it was how creeps were making these awful plans. But some of the posts were saved. And I want to talk about what these guys believe because it is wild. Samuel Schaeffer claims that he has had numerous divine experiences and supernatural visions, and that he has been chosen by God as a prophet to receive these prophecies. I mean, sing a new song, Cocoa Puff. All these guys claim this. It is so tired. Samuel claims that on October 28th, 2016, he had a revelation that told him all of his past revelations were tainted. Oh, there's some taints going on here. All of his past revelations were not true. Samuel was being deceived, you see, because he hadn't yet accepted his true calling. There was this website. I've been on it, I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago researching. It was called Council of Seers. One version of it's been taken down. There is a new version up. But on that website, Samuel was proclaiming that his past revelations were null and void. Redacted. Redacted. Samuel was now claiming that his new revelations were the true revelations because he had met John Coltharp, and together they had like Wonder Twin power activated their true prophet callings. Do you guys know who the Wonder Twins are? I'm old. Samuel claimed that only the revelations he received after forming Knights of the Crystal Blade with John could be trusted. Samuel's revelation reads, "A fire hath been kindled in my bones, and a word hath come unto my lips, and I cannot restrain it. For the Lord hath spoken unto me as by fire and by the Holy Ghost all the words that he did reveal after ye were an Aaronic priest, save those words that ye have delivered unto John Alvin Coltharp, and a few precious few words otherwise are polluted. Bow thyself down and repent, that ye may be a tool in my hand, and not a servant of darkness that must needs be destroyed." Does anyone else find it weird how God only speaks to these prophets in this one specific type of phrasing and like Old English, even to modern people? Does anyone else find that weird? No, just me? Okay. Samuel and John are determined to start this cult and wait out the apocalypse in the desert. And now they've got the land. They've got a few followers, and they've got their own daughters all set up to repopulate the earth after the apocalypse happens. With it all laid out, the Knights of the Crystal Blade put their very dark plan into action. John Coltharp arrives to pick up his 4 children from his estranged wife, Micah. John and Micah were going through a divorce, and for some reason, Micah had agreed to let John take their 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls, to go and live with his parents for a while. So John takes the kids, and several months goes by, and now the divorce is finalized. I don't know the details on why Micah wasn't seeing their kids during this time, so I will not judge that. I don't know the circumstances. But in late November, the divorce was finalized, and Micah, their mother, was given legal custody of the children. So she involves the courts and asks for police assistance in gathering her kids from her now ex-husband and his parents. But the police cannot find the children. They begin looking for John, and a few days later they find him. John is located in northern Utah, and on December 1st, he's arrested for custodial interference. The problem is that the kids were gone, and John wouldn't tell the investigators where they were, just that they were safe and they were with Samuel Schaeffer. Well, of course, this is not good enough for the courts, and the courts demand to know where the kids are. At first, the police thought they could get John to talk, but he wouldn't. So the Iron County Sheriff's Office, which is in Cedar City, becomes involved, and the cops begin looking into this compound west of Cedar. They find out that John Coltharp's compound is near a little tiny town. It's not even really a town. If anything, it's a ghost town, but it's called Lund. I mean, this is about all you see out in Lund. It's inhabited a little bit, but I mean, you wouldn't want to be out there at night. Let's put it that way. So these kids have really basically been missing since May. I don't know if Micah was talking to them or visiting them or seeing them, but they had been with John since May. We find out later on that he didn't take the kids into the desert until around September. But once the divorce is finalized and Micah has legal custody, the police issue an Amber Alert. That happens on December 4th. It alerts the public that these 4 kids are officially missing. The Iron County Sheriff's Office mobilizes and travels to John's property out near Lund, and there they raid his compound. What they find is, they find John's 2 sons and their grandparents living in the middle of nowhere in this storage container. There's actually 2 storage containers kind of butted up together that they've fixed up with some tarps and old wood they're living in. It's The Hills Have Eyes. It's a horror movie. The cops ask the grandparents, where are the 2 girls, the Coltharp girls? Because only the 2 little boys are with the grandparents. And the grandparents tell the police that the 2 little girls have spent the night with Samuel Schaeffer in a tent that's further out on the property. So the cops begin to search the property, and after a while, they see Samuel Schaeffer walking alone down a dirt road, miles away from the compound. Like I said earlier, this is not somewhere you can sneak up on anyone. And as soon as Samuel saw these multiple matching vehicles coming from miles and miles down the road, kicking up the dirt, he knew the cops were coming for him. And apparently he just started walking, knowing it was his last day as a free man. He actually was hoping to get away. Why? Because he knew what he'd been doing to those little girls, and he knew they were going to tell. Okay, this is where I gotta. During his arrest, Samuel tells the cops that when he saw their vehicles coming from miles away, he grabbed his gun and prepared himself for a shootout with the cops. But then the Lord prompted him to begin walking. Yeah, you coward, because those cops would have blown your head off. That's the reason you decided not to shoot at them. I mean, it's kind of too bad, except for that a cop could have been hurt or killed, so obviously. But I'm just saying, this guy being dead it'd probably be too easy for him, honestly. If you want to know what I think we should do with him, I better keep it to myself. It comes out that it's even worse than what these 2 idiots had planned. Samuel had married John's oldest daughter and vice versa. But then the 2 men, oh my gosh, you guys, the 2 men had each married their own 4-year-old daughters. I just want to say this out loud again because it is so disturbing, and it should be disturbing. These two men each married their own 4-year-old babies, and they were raping these babies for months. Not just the 4-year-olds, the older girls too. What these little girls went through, the boys suffered, but the girls had it much worse. The cops find Samuel's own children, these two little girls, these babies, in a tiny little rundown trailer on Eugene Richards' property. Where were John's little girls? Samuel had forced them inside 2 50-gallon water barrels to hide. Can you imagine? These assholes have taken these little kids and told them that the end of the world is coming and that they have to hide from everyone. Can you imagine how terrified these little kids must have been? And on top of that, this is December in Iron County, Utah. It is well below freezing at that point. These kids must have been so cold. Look at these photos of them being rescued. The girls don't even have socks on, let alone shoes. And they were left outside. The cops listen to Samuel before they find the girls. They're like, what do you mean you put the kids in 50-gallon drums? And Samuel didn't seem to think that was a problem at all. The girls told the police they hadn't had food or water in over a day. They were not clean. They had not had a bath for months. Their hair was matted. Oh my God, this just makes me so mad. People want to say, oh, but God spared them. But God, where was God? Where was God when they were being raped? That's what I want to know. That's what I want you to explain to me. Explain to me like I'm 5. Oh, but people have free agency, and if they choose to be evil, then don't talk to me about where God is and how he saved them. He waited until after they were raped multiple times before he saved them. Okay, got it. I can't. The kids are all taken to the hospital in Cedar City, and the nurses said it took 3 baths to get the girls even starting to be clean and to get the mats out of their hair. And the little girls were so happy to get some food and hot chocolate. Oh my God. One of the little girls tells a nurse that the last thing her father said to her was, "Find me when you're older. I love you." All 4 of the little girls had to be hospitalized for days and treated for dehydration. Samuel later tells prosecutors that the ceremony where the 2 men gave their daughters to each other was a beautiful event. They built a campfire with the grandparents there. So what I want to know are, where are these 2 asshole grandparents? I want to know what happened to them. I looked. I even posted on Facebook to see if anybody knew. Anyway, Samuel and John hold hands over the campfire. And as they pray and spoke in Revelations, the flames of the fire turned green. And Samuel asked John, "Do you see that?" And John said, "Yes, I see it." And then the girls were handed over from father to father, and the flames returned to their normal color. I hope you religious people are right. I hope there is a hell so hot that we cannot comprehend with green flames. I hope you're right. I do. I really, really do. So now the cops have these 2 lunatics in custody, and the children are safe and reunited with the other side of the grandparents. I couldn't find any information on them either, but the kids are at least physically safe. Both Samuel and John are charged with sexual assault and kidnapping. Both of these human trash bags are claiming that their actions were divinely sanctioned. John Coltharp is charged with bigamy and sodomy and child abuse. So first I'm going to tell you what happens to the men, and then I need to tell you what comes out later on, because at trial, Samuel Schaeffer tells Judge Matthew Bell, "In our religious belief, custody of the state is worse than death. It was taught to us that way by John Coltharp because he's the end-all be-all. I mean, fucking idiots." Samuel gets 26 years to life for child and child abuse. The judge orders that the 2 sentences run consecutively, meaning when one 26 to life is over, he's got a second one waiting for him. He's never getting out of prison, and that's just the way it should be. He's only in his late 30s, so he's got a nice long life in prison, and we love that for him. John Coltharp, at the time in 2018, was only 34, so he's a young man too, and he also gets 26 to life in prison for child bigamy and sodomy. John decided to plead guilty in exchange for the state dismissing the kidnapping and obstruction of justice charges against him. The prosecutor tells Coltharp that he wishes he had the power to impose the death penalty because of the trauma John inflicted on all 6 children. Later, it comes out that the boys' hair was so matted to their heads with tree sap that they thought they were going to have to shave their heads. The boys had also been sleeping in diapers because it was too cold outside to use the bathroom in the middle of the night. So they basically had to be re-toilet trained at like 9 and 10 years old. When Micah got the boys back, they were having accidents every night. John would take these two boys out away from this makeshift shipping container, miles away, and leave them in the desert to find their way home as a test. These are little, tiny boys. The kids lived on Pop-Tarts and Spam. The things that happened to these little girls, I cannot say on this platform, but it includes being inspected to ensure they were virgins when they were 7 and 4 years old. Micah reports that there are certain things that the kids are very triggered by now. The girls were forced to drink alcohol at 4 and 7 years old before each of their and sometimes with dinner. Micah said when she got the kids back, the boys would not even look at the girls because Stephen and John had warned them to stay away from their wives. These two sick saw these boys as competition for mating privileges and didn't want them thinking they could take the girls away from them as they got older. Does anybody know anybody in the Utah State Prison? Because I'd like to put some money on somebody's books for a favor. Coltharp continues to ramble from prison. He tells a reporter, there's changes coming to this world, including this state. Those changes are close. The government will be overthrown, as will all the governments of the world. I love the gospel of Jesus Christ. I taught it to my children and my wives. My marriage was the right thing to do. And if I'm a sex offender for what I've done, I'll go to the other side in good company with all those other sex offenders I've read about in the scriptures. Bang up job, Christianity. If you're a good Christian, I expect you guys to speak out against people like this. I really do. Because the rest of us are getting tired. Robert Rowe, this pedo who moved from California with the promise of a waiting child bride, was charged with first-degree on a child. These crimes were committed 8 years ago, and because of COVID and other things, Robert Rowe is just now going to trial. This piece of shit is set to begin trial on January 13th, 2025. I've got the date on my calendar, and when that happens, believe me, I will bring you an update. I don't even know where to begin with sending our thoughts and our love to Micah and her kids and to the kids of Samuel Schaeffer. You've all been through something horrific. The girls would now be between like 11 and 12 and 15 and 16. The boys would be teenagers by now. I actually hope you kids don't ever see this episode. I really do. But if you do, I want you to know that we're proud of you for healing and for moving forward with your lives and surviving this terrible ordeal. And I want you to know your story of survival has really touched me. I think if you do ever see this, that you'll see in the comments it's touched a lot of other people as well. I hope the mothers of these kids are recovering and healing, and I certainly hope that they had no involvement in any of this. I don't think they did. I couldn't find any information on that anyway. And I hope that Samuel Schaeffer and John Coltharp get what's coming to them. I hope they get theirs in prison, and I hope they never again see the light of day. Thank you for joining me today on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. These are the episodes that, I told you guys a couple weeks ago, I know there are some creators that have stopped making videos. You have to remember that for everything that you hear in these episodes, there's a lot of information you don't hear, but it's up here and I have to live with it. As hard as it is, we have to talk about these things. We need to be aware that these things are going on. We need to be aware that these creeps, these disgusting perverts are out there, and we need to know how to look for the red flags. There are dog whistles. There are signs. There are phrases. There are tattoos. There are things these people say. There are flags. There are political ideologies, and we have got to understand how dangerous they are. This is not about one party or another. This is about people who have gone so far off of the rails that they are doing things like this to kids in the name of religion. I'm not really going to bother with the promo of the channel today. You guys know I have 2 podcasts on Apple and Spotify, and you know that you can like and subscribe to the channel if you want to support me and see more from me. We are also in the middle of a fundraiser. This is the thumbnail. If you go and watch this short little video, it tells you everything we do here in our community to raise money to donate to police departments so they can get some cold case DNA kits tested. Usually the kits are sexual assaults, and there are a lot of people waiting to get those kits tested to see if they can get their crime solved. Not a real fun ending today, and not a real fun episode. I mean, some very kooky beliefs, but I mean, damn, you talk about dark. I love you guys, and I hope you're well. Take care of yourselves, please. Be kind to each other, please. And I will see you next time on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Bye.